So we talked a little while back about The Last of Us Season 2, Ellie being kind of misunderstood and underutilized, blah, blah, blah. We went through all of that. But in response to that, there were some discussions over how they could have changed it and how the story changed over time and how Craig Mazin also changed it from the story in the game to the story in the show. And it brought up a lot of these discussions over the story of The Last of Us Part 2. And one of you guys in the community sent me a video that just dropped a few days ago from an up-and-coming YouTuber by the name of TheSilverSentry. And it is basically a breakdown, as far as I understand it, of what the story of The Last of Us Part 2 was, what was changed and when, what was cut, what was rewritten, all of that stuff. It's a collection from a bunch of different interviews, from the documentaries, from all of that put into one place, even with some little tidbits taken from little Easter eggs or overlooked things within the game. There's actually something in here I didn't know about, and I did a 5-hour critique of this game. Like I went pretty deep into it, and there was a reference, because I watched the first like 4 minutes of it, and there's a reference to something, right here on the clipboard, that I had never heard before, or at least I don't remember hearing, because it looks like a remnant of what the story was supposed to be originally is still in the game, and they forgot to remove it. So seems like this guy really did his homework, really dug into it. I'm excited to see this. I'm going to post the link to the video in chat. I recommend you guys go give the video a view, a like. You can let him know Luke sent you, whatever. And of course, in the stream clip of this, we will have a link to his channel as well. I'm genuinely very excited to see what he's done here. So let's check it out and see what we got with The Last of Us Part 2.
The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the most controversial, most divisive games of all time, and that much we all know. But despite everything, the game has won over 300 Game of the Year awards, it's one of the highest rated PlayStation titles, not by fans, but by the critics, and it broke many sales records. It's a game that, even if not universally loved, left a significant mark on gaming history. But
maybe impactful, maybe not loved, because even like somebody that plays it and is like thought it was a masterpiece, they might not have actually loved the time they spent with it, because I've called it a misery simulator. Like, it's a tough game to get through because it's just emotionally draining. By the time you're done with it, you're like, oh thank God, because it's just so intense for like 30 hours. It's just a lot. So yeah, it's one of those games. I remember hearing in an interview with Neil Druckmann where he said back in like 2016, 17, I think they were talking about The Last of Us Part 2. And he's like, we think at the studio a lot over whether games need to be fun. And it kind of makes sense when you play The Last of Us Part 2, why that was a debate within the studio. Because there are many times I don't think it feels fun to play. I think it's emotionally intense, but it might not be fun, some of these sequences. But anyway.
did you know that The Last of Us Part 2 could have been really different? Today, I'm going to tell you all about cut content from The Last of Us Part 2. Some of you might already know a bit about this, but others will be seriously surprised by what you're going to hear today. Drastically different mechanics, new characters, major story changes that would have completely shifted the direction of the game, and a lot more content that was cut before it was even fully developed. So, I'm
genuinely very excited for this because I know a good amount of this stuff, but like I said, I listened to the first few minutes of this and there was already one piece that I had not heard before. So I'm genuinely excited to hear this.
Wasting much more of your time, just subscribe if you want to and drop a like. And with that said, let's get to it.
Story changes. Turns out in the game, Ellie was supposed to be a dad. That wasn't just for the show. Okay, I'll stop.
We all know how traumatic and horrifying Joel's death was, and still is to this day. That torture scene that goes on for what feels like hours and ends with Ellie watching her own father figure being murdered right in front of her, it's terrifying. But within this story, Joel's death in its original version would have been a little different, and I'll let Neil Druckmann himself explain how it was supposed to go.
Yeah, explain it, Neil. Explain it.
There's a doorway leading down to this basement, and Ellie sees Tommy, and he's just finished climbing out of this basement, and he's hurt bad, and he's rambling about something, needing to go after these people. Ellie's trying to ask him what happened, where's Joel, and he doesn't make any sense to her, and she starts to go downstairs. Tommy grabs her hand and tries to stop her, but he's too weak. She rips her arm away, and she heads down. And with each step, Her heart races faster and faster as she sees this trail of blood. She opens the door, revealing Joel's mutilated body. And then shock just sets in and she screams and tries to grab his body, and Dina comes and rips her away, and on that cacophony of sounds, silence.
That's right. Joel's death.
Yeah, originally it was not supposed to be this like thing where they forced Ellie to watch. I think they realized that then she wouldn't know specifically who killed Joel, and so it would be difficult to then start like a massive revenge plot because of that. So I think they pivoted that way after that. But yeah, I do think that's a component of it. I think so.
Death was originally going to be a bit more mysterious in a certain way. Ellie wouldn't have been there when it all happened. The only person who would have seen everything, who knew exactly what went down, was Tommy, which honestly makes me wonder if his role would have been even more important in a game. This idea of Ellie finding Joel's body tortured, completely mutilated, already dead, is something that honestly I don't even know if it would have been more or less traumatic. Overall, the scene would have been similar, Ellie going down the stairs and seeing his body, but one thing is for sure, at no point was Joel's death ever going to be left out of part 2. That was something 100% locked in during the game's development. It was one of those core things that just never changed. Sad, I know I love Joel too, but the story of the second game only exists because of his death. It's that typical cycle The Last of Us loves to explore. Violence leads to more violence. And actually, in the beginning, the idea wasn't that the big reason for Abby's revenge was Joel killing her dad, the Firefly surgeon at the end of part 1, but this instead.
This next bit is genuinely very interesting. Yeah, I think it was one of those things where for a sequel in a very heavy narrative game like this, like at some point you have to do something with the characters that's unexpected, which in a way is still very, very expected. And I think what they wanted to avoid was just The Last of Us 1.5. You know, they wanted to do something fresh. They wanted a new protagonist. They wanted to focus on Ellie this time. And they could do it with Joel there, but that just, you know, they're like, that's not different enough. And so they had this idea to shake it up in terms of gameplay by totally removing him from it. And then also, of course, it's just eye-catching and stunning that Joel's dead. And they're hoping that that gets the player to be motivated on this revenge quest as well. Again, I think the themes of The Last of Us Part 2 are interesting and could have been really fun to explore. I just think that doing it with Joel and Ellie as the characters, players already had such a firm attachment to them that there was no way that was ever going to go over well. Like there were always going to be people who were just immediately dismissive of it. They're like, I know what you're trying to do. Oh, it's all about perspective. Oh, it's all about Ellie's, you know, the bad guy to Abby and Abby's the bad guy to Ellie, and it's all about perspective. Like everybody knows what you're doing. I still am upset because you killed Joel. You know, like everybody's still upset about it. Anyway, this is genuinely interesting though, because in this little interview, he's sharing what the original plan was for how this kickstarted.
The first iteration of Abby was you would have played with her as a kid in this kind of caravan of people like moving between places, and all of a sudden they get ambushed and they get shot and all these people are killed, and then you see Joel and Tommy and you see them in the years when they were hunters. Mm-hmm. And she survived it. Like her dad moved her away, her mom moved her away, I don't remember the specifics of it, and she witnessed these two guys.
Joel and Tommy, during those 20 years as hunters, the time skip we never got to see, would have killed dozens of people in the caravan, including Abby's mother and father. And she...
Because remember in Pittsburgh when Joel gets jumped in the car with Ellie in the car, and she's like, how did you know they were going to do that? How did you know that guy was faking it? And he was like, I've been on the other side, basically. He's like, I've been there, you know? And it's, they don't go into specifics, but it's understood that when Joel and Tommy were trying to survive after Sarah's death, they did some messed up stuff. They did some messed up stuff to survive. And he doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to think about it. But that's why I do think that a game exploring Joel and Tommy's, you know, middle period, that like 20-year period, would be genuinely very, very interesting. I just think that, you know, that would achieve the same thing and it would work one-to-one with the lore, because already, you know, Joel had mentioned that before, that he had, sorry, I'm replacing my battery. He had mentioned before that he had done bad things and he wasn't proud of it and he didn't want to talk to Ellie about it. And it made sense in the context of the world and everything that Joel had to do to survive, and you know, it works. But they pivoted off of that. They pivoted off of it. Maybe it was too on the nose that Joel was the bad guy, but you'll hear him describe why he thinks they did it, because they wanted to up the stakes from the events of the last game.
She would have been the only survivor, a little girl who managed to escape, that girl being Abby. And honestly, it wouldn't have been a bad choice for a revenge story, but they ended up going with a surgeon idea instead to give even more weight to Joel's final decision. The fact that by saving Ellie, he didn't just take away humanity's last possibility, with a very heavy emphasis, at a cure, he also caused his own death. A butterfly effect that didn't just change the world, but destroy his own life too. And in the early writing stages of the game, the way we'd meet Abby would have been very different. She and her group were supposed to infiltrate Jackson, and little by little we'd get to know her, get attached to her, which would have made the shock of Joel's death even worse.
This has been what I've said since the first time I played The Last of Us Part 2. I think it was even in a speculation video I made in like 2019. We alluded to something similar to this. It was kind of a fan theory at the time, but basically the idea being that Abby would break into Jackson posing with a few other people as stranded survivors whose group was like ambushed or something, and they needed refuge, not refuse. That's a different thing. They needed a place of refuge to hide out and maybe hold off until the end of the winter, and in the spring they would take off and go find somewhere else. And so they would go, they'd stay at Jackson, and then Abby and maybe Owen, Mel, and a couple other people, they would go and help do patrols and help, you know, grow some food in the gardens. And they would get to know Abby or know Ellie and Joel and Tommy and know people within the town, learn a little bit more about them. That could explain how they found out who Joel was. Oh, that's Joel. Okay. And it doesn't require this like super coincidental contrived thing of like, oh, she happens to end up in the storm while Joel happens to be on patrol and they happen to be in the same spot, and Joel happens to save her from the infected and happens to go along with her, a total stranger, into an isolated area of the town that nobody's checked in a while. Very, very contrived across the board. It didn't really make sense for Joel's character, in my opinion, to be so naive with it. But Abby infiltrating Jackson with her group, I think would have made a lot more sense and would have worked with her character, would have made sense with Joel's character, given a chance for her to jump on it. And then imagine how the rest of the game plays out after that. Ellie knew Abby for weeks or months, got to know her face to face, her voice, her tastes, maybe learned that she's afraid of heights. And that could lead into Ellie trying to ambush her in a way that takes advantage of that thing that she knows about Abby. You know, there's all sorts of new ripples you can add to it because they had that exposure to each other, you know, and it could make a lot more sense why she would feel like especially betrayed by Abby. So then it's not just a revenge quest. It's also like a revenge quest framed with betrayal beyond just like an assault and an assassination, you know? So I think it could have been really, really interesting if they had done that. I think it would have worked better, frankly.
You can even still see Abby's and Manny's name.
Well, maybe you're right, Blue Snake. I think that the, or Byron said it. I think the betrayal would make it even harder to empathize with Abby, though. It's probably why they pivoted off, because if the whole premise is that, well, we're going to switch perspectives and you're going to go to Abby, if you got to know her through the eyes of Ellie and then that betrayal hits, it might make it harder to sympathize with her. I would say already most people are dismissive of Abby to begin with. Like the people who are like, screw you, you killed Joel, will still think that, whether they like got to see her more up front early in the game. So I think it still would have been a net positive, but I bet that's probably a component of why they pivoted away. That's my guess.
The shock of Joel's death even worse. You can even still see Abby's and Manny's name in one of the in-game to-do lists, something that the devs probably just forgot to remove, but they...
Yeah, look at that. I had never seen this before. It's a clipboard that says assignments, and you can see Manny and Abby's name right there. Manny, Abby. And so the belief is that this is a leftover asset from when they were supposed to infiltrate Jackson. And they were like assigned to go out on these patrols. And this is a leftover piece of that. I had never seen this before, but if that's where this is from, that's genuinely really, really cool that still is in the game. Just a little bitty remnant, you know? The Yeast of Us, thank you for the 5. It's wild how they would do this with the show since it's wild. I thought they would do this with the show, especially since they put some emphasis on the immigration Jackson was doing, but they went nowhere. Yeah, maybe they felt it would have been too much of a pivot away from the base story. I don't know. But I think that this could have been really, really interesting. Mr. Mo says maybe they could have framed it in a way where Abby did not want to kill Joel after living there, but the thought of revenge cannot leave her mind and just eats at her. Yeah. I mean, that could have been it. It could have been also something where like maybe she gets Joel isolated, you know, they go out on patrol together, the blizzard hits at that point, and they're like alone in this cabin, and she confronts him over it, and she asks him about the doctor in Salt Lake City, and he's like, I don't know, it was just a freaking doctor, I don't give a shit. Like he does something dismissive towards it. And she snaps, and that's when she kills him. And so it was something where like she didn't want to, but she was overcome with the rage, and then that overtook her, and that can also be mirrored later with Ellie. There's things they could have done, you know. There's things they could have done, I think, and I think it would have worked a lot better. I think the one of the big problems with the start of The Last of Us Part 2 is that it's very contrived, it's very forced, and it just feels bad and artificial to the player, especially when the first game was really focused on like character motivations and behaviors and stuff. This feels very, very forced.
But they ended up cutting that idea because it messed too much with the game's pacing. We'd have to watch Abby sneak into Jackson with her group, gain Joel and Ellie's trust for several hours of gameplay, and in the end she'd betray them both. That would have made the story way more confused and dragged out, and Abby would have been seen as even more irredeemable for many.
I don't know though. I think the game already has a really slow intro. Like, I don't know if you've played it recently, but you know, everything from the snowball fights with Dina to then the confrontation at the dance hall with, or not dance hall, the restaurant with what's his name, who's a filthy bigot, you know. There's the patrol sequence. There's a good amount of fluff, I feel, in the opening section of the game. So Seth. So I think that, you know, the pacing excuse, I can understand it. I think, again, there's ways to work around it. And I still insist, I think it would have worked better than what's in the game now.
Manipulating the town and betraying the people who welcome her. Basically, she'd be even more hated. Not that I really like her now either. And in that,
I think she reached terminal hatred at some point. Like, there's a point where you can't actually, like with terminal velocity, you can't go faster. I think for her, she reached terminal hate with killing Joel. So I think at that point, it's kind of lost on everybody, where it's like, Seth's like, yeah. I think at that point, if she had infiltrated and betrayed everybody, like, yeah, it would have been like, okay, you. But I think her killing Joel is what causes everybody to see red. And I think at that point, you know, it's not like, well, now she's irredeemable. She killed Joel. For a lot of people, she's already irredeemable. I don't think that makes her irredeemable. I think killing Joel makes her irredeemable. So I think the method by which she encountered him would not mess it up too much.
That version, that draft, is when Joel's death would have happened with Ellie finding his body. And as we all know, Joel didn't get nearly as much screen time in this game as he did in the first one, but originally Joel was supposed to have a love interest, a woman named Esther. She was going to be introduced early in the game, and she and Joel would have gotten together during those 5 years between part 1 and part 2. And a fact about her is that she lived about 2 hours from Jackson. It was revealed that during one of Ellie's flashbacks with Tommy and Joel, Esther would have gotten infected and Joel would have had to kill her himself. Just one more tragedy to the life of Joel. But she ended up being cut from the game because the devs felt there wasn't enough time to build a real bond with her, and the whole thing would have felt like filler. Still, give me...
Yeah, specifically what they wanted to do was they wanted there to be a mission where Joel and Ellie go off and are visiting her. She's been infected. Like right before, maybe they're jumped while they're out collecting something. Maybe she joined them to go to the music store to get the guitar strings or something. But then they go inside the building. They force Ellie to wait outside. She understands what has to happen. She needs, like, she's infected. She's going to turn. But Joel goes into the house or the cabin or whatever with her. A moment passes. You hear a gunshot. And then Joel comes back out. So the player doesn't know and Ellie doesn't know if Joel is the one that did it or if she did it to herself and then Joel just comforted her in that final moment. But it was supposed to be like one of those little reminders of how horrible this universe and world is. But like they said, they felt like this was Ellie's game and that was just going to be too out of nowhere, you know, too much. Too much.
Me all the filler in the world if it's about Joel. He deserved more in this game, and it would have been so interesting to see what Joel in love would have been like. But now let's get...
I do think that you have to ask yourself though when you're writing a story, what does this add to the actual like plot? And that I don't know if it actually adds much. Like what does Joel having a love interest add to the revenge plot? Nothing. What does Joel having a love interest add to like her rage? Like not really anything. It's just an interesting tidbit. It's an interesting wrinkle, sure, but it doesn't add anything to what else is going on, you know? It just doesn't.
It's the major change in The Last of Us Part 2, the one that would have changed everything, even a future sequel, and that almost made it into the game. Originally, Ellie was going to kill Abby at the end, but Haley Gross convinced Neil Druckmann to let her live. If you like Abby, that's fine, I respect that. I just don't. I would have preferred if Ellie, after everything she went through, had finished her cycle, but if you don't, that's fine. And no, I don't hate the game just because Joel died. I'm totally fine with that decision actually. I just don't like Abby, and that's okay too. In the original ending, after Ellie kills Abby, she returns to the farm like in the final game, but she ends up getting tortured by people who lost loved ones to Ellie during her time in Seattle. Once again, that cycle of violence. And that's when...
That would just be so on the nose. Like imagine she goes back to the house and then she gets jumped in the middle of a snowstorm. It would be like, guys, we see what you're doing. Like, this isn't that nuanced. Come on. Like, oh, that would be, I'm glad they didn't do that. That would have been kind of cringe. That would have been kind of cringe. Yeah. It's, no, you see, Luke, it's a loop. It's a circle of rage. Like, I know everybody sees it. It's not really that clever. It's just, it's too on the nose. Like it's not actually that brilliant. Yeah. It's like a little cringe. It's when you keep beating the dead horse over and over again with a golf club that people start to just mentally check out. You know, if you're trying to teach the lesson, end the cycle of violence. That's okay. Like do that. You don't need to do it 2 times or 3 times in the same game, you know? Bender the Offender. Paula, thank you.
Bender the Offender donated $10 through Super Chat. I really like The Last of Universe because of how plausible the characters, world and sense of trying to survive in a post-apocalypse. It's a shame 2 messed things up in terms of narrative.
Yeah, I think it just really, at the end of the day, they were just stuck on this idea. And you can tell that there was some moment in like 2015, 2016, when they were talking about what they wanted to do. And somebody, probably Neil, had the idea, what if Joel dies, you go after his killer, and then we force you to play as his killer and flip it. And then we make you realize Ellie and Joel were somebody else's villain, just like Joel's killer is the villain to Ellie and Joel. But we flip the perspective. We force the player to flip the perspective, and we teach them that lesson that everything's about perspective. You can tell that he had that idea, and then he could not let it go. Even if it didn't really work, even if it didn't mechanically really click with people, even if it made people upset and pissed off, didn't really matter. He still was like, we'll figure it out. And I really think that's what happened. Like, Naughty Dog is known for being very iterative, where they'll work on something, and if it doesn't work, no matter how late in development and how far along it is, they'll cut it if it doesn't work. And weirdly enough, I think The Last of Us Part 2 was one of those games where they just didn't do that. Like, they made iterative cuts for sure to certain things. We're hearing about a lot of them here, but I think there were certain things that were off limits that they just were unwilling to change or shake up or reconsider. And I think those are the parts of the game that feel overly rigid because they don't click as well. You know, they probably should have been reworked.
When she would have lost her 2 fingers, not in the final fight. I don't hate the story of the game, I just don't really love it. There are things in it that for me personally, I'll never be able to like, no matter how good the writing is or the gameplay, whatever. And what really frustrates me is that it's almost impossible to criticize this story without people coming at you saying, you just didn't understand the story, you're only mad because your character died, blah blah blah. Like the game has some super secret subliminal message that only a genius could decode. I understood the story, I just didn't like a big part of it.
Yeah. And to a certain extent, it's a testament to the quality of the first game, that people grew so attached to Joel that when another fictional character killed him off, they hated her. It's a testament to how good the writing was. So in a way, they can be proud of that. But you also can't blame the audience for being attached to a character and being pissed when you killed them off, you know?
Yeah, you read that right. The Last of Us Part 2 at the very beginning of its development had some ideas of including a kind of open world inspired by Bloodborne.
When we started out making Last of Us Part 2, Neil actually wanted to be very ambitious about changing the game almost entirely. That's weird. In the first 4 or 5 months, the game was actually kind of an open world inspired by Bloodborne.
Bloodborne had a very sort of an open space that sort of kept getting bigger and bigger as you explored.
We started out making it as different as humanly possible from the first game as we could, and then kind of dialing it back. The open world thing didn't work with the story that we were trying to tell and stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, open worlds in games that are trying to be very narrative, it just kind of turns into Far Cry, like Far Cry 5 or something, where it's like, okay, here are 5 world bosses you have to beat in each of their regions. Beat them in any order because we can't tell when you're going to go after one versus the other. And then you go after the main boss after all of those are defeated. And it just comes off very generic and it doesn't work for the kind of game they want to make. Interestingly, though, it sounds like that's exactly what Intergalactic the Heretic Prophet is, according to the leaks. It sounds like that's going to be pretty much exactly what it is. A lot of the leaks have suggested it's in line with Elden Ring in terms of overall design and scope and what their goal is, which is going to be interesting. Genuinely interested to see what that looks like. Hey, give me sick gameplay. That's what I'm saying. If they can give the gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2 with really high quality AI and stealth mechanics and stuff, hey, could be baller. Could be baller.
According to the developers themselves, they were moving completely away from what the first game was, which is honestly kind of strange, but I believe that this idea of an open world wasn't your typical traditional open world. Just like they mentioned, it would have been something similar to how Bloodborne handled its world, something you explore bit by bit, uncovering more and more as you go. It's something that could have been really interesting, but the idea was left behind early in the project so they could focus more deeply on the narrative, and even on how the story could be told through the smaller open areas we do get in the game. Maybe that's an idea they'll explore in the third game, who knows? There are a few here. One of them, which actually ties in with the open world we just talked about, was kind of a moral choice system. Basically, as we explored the world, we'd be able to come across certain people and decide whether we wanted to help them or kill them. And then later we might meet that same person again and they could either return the favor or not. But none of those choices would have impacted the main narrative, just optional side encounters. This was actually a mechanic that got cut from both the first and the second game, which honestly makes me wonder if we'll finally see it in the third game. Now, speaking more in terms of gameplay,
I think that could be interesting, especially on the theme of you give people the option of being a moral Ellie or an immoral Ellie. That could be interesting. I think maybe the problem they would run into is that not having an impact on the main story would feel weird, because it's Ellie killed an extra 24 people. And that doesn't have any role to play within the main story. It just shows up in side activities or something. It still could be interesting. Could be interesting for sure.
Devs wanted more destructible environments. For example, bombs could blow up parts of walls or even the ground, which would have added way more dynamic gameplay, but that's the kind of thing that would have pushed the PS4 hardware way past its limit. And let's be honest, the game already pushed that console to the edge, so it makes sense why it didn't make it into the final version. Something that kind of ties into that is the rope. The rope in The Last of Us Part 2 is honestly one of the most impressive physics systems we've ever seen in any game, and at the time it came out, whoa. But originally
I remember when it came out, it blew people's minds that it was running in real time. Mad Moho, thank you for the sub with Prime. Thank
The
you.
rope was meant to be way more important to the gameplay, even used as some kind of combat ally, kind of like what we see in Uncharted. And I think just by me saying that, you already get why it was scrapped. It would have brought a more action-heavy feel that doesn't really fit in with the grounded, realistic tone that The Last of Us goes for. And the game's AI, which is already insanely smart and honestly very impressive, was supposed to be even better. The idea was that enemies could plan ambushes in more detail, react more perfectly during combat against either Ellie or Abby, and that would tie in with a better stealth system. They even had a few extra stealth mechanics in mind, like being able to crawl under almost any car in the game, and even cover yourself in mud to blend in and avoid being spotted by enemies. And honestly, that would have been super cool, definitely something I'd probably welcome, but it's also not something that feels completely necessary.
Yeah, already the game is like pretty damn impressive. I mean, still going back to it, just imagine any of that stuff running on the PS4. Because again, this game ran on the base PS4, the big chunky base PS4. It could still run it. That's wild, dude. Concept characters.
For me, one of the things I've always found super interesting is looking at early character concepts and seeing how different they could have been. Starting obviously with Ellie. She went through a lot of hairstyle variations, some were shorter, others longer. Same thing with her outfits. She had tons of different looks before they settled on the final ones we see in the game. Several different styles were tested. But for me, the most interesting concept is this one piece of art where we see Ellie with a dog, a companion that would have stayed with her throughout the journey. Sadly, it was cut, but maybe in the future. Joel also went through quite a few hairstyle tests, including some very...
The balding. The eye patch would have been cool. The eye patch would have been cool. Imagine if he was just like full on balding and had the horseshoe and everything. It's just like, hey, it happens to the best of us. Odin?
weird ones, but by far, the character who changed the most was Abby. We all know her as the muscular, Viking-looking blonde.
Yeah, the muscle mommy. Neil likes his muscle mommies. Again, some people tease him over that. Hey man, no judgment. You know, Neil likes his muscle mommies. He likes his super buff chicks beating up dudes. More power to you, my man. Put Nadine in Uncharted 4. He's like, have her beat up everybody. Yeah, like, yeah, you freak. You crazy man. Yeah, I respect it. Yeah. Anyway. Cheetah Duck, thank you for the 5. If any part of the game needed a Bloodborne touch, it was the boat scene. Imagine walking through the fog and then boom, the boat scene starts, dude. That would actually be kind of funny. That would actually be funny. It's like a little Easter egg. You open the door and he's just been hotboxing it or something. That would be funny. That's funny.
But she's a character that went through drastic changes.
And I don't remember at what point we decided to go with someone like really kind of muscular and broad. But I remember once the idea came up, it felt very fresh.
Once we sort of...
Which is funny, because when Abby was revealed, it shocked nobody. Everybody's like, Neil, you did it again, Neil. Like everybody. That's just funny. It's like it's very fresh. Okay, Neil. Okay.
sort of nailed down the body of Abby. We played around with different ideas of how we wanted to accentuate her arms or not.
And there's something.
Neil's just like if my head were a watermelon, like between her knees, and she like pushed them together, like would it pop? I want you to design her where it would explode. You know? I want her to look like she could hurt me emotionally and physically at the same time. Could you help me out with that? Neil, you sly dog. Oh, Neil. Oh,
Interesting in Abby feeling a lot like Joel.
Originally, Abby was going to be a lot skinnier, more similar to what Ellie is like, but the
And honestly, like she looks in the show.
team decided to make her bulkier, more muscular, to give her the same tank vibe that Joel had, a character who can throw hands with anyone. It was also a way to really separate the gameplay between Ellie and Abby so it wouldn't feel too repetitive.
This is the more common excuse I've heard, is that they did it for gameplay reasons because they wanted Abby to feel different when playing than Ellie did. to shake it up. And they did that in some ways with different weapons, like different things like the crossbow versus the bow and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if I totally buy it. Like, I think if you had Ellie and then, you know, Abby was this like really small, kind of scrawny, more tactical character who's very stealth oriented, using a lot of traps and tools and stuff, that could have been a really interesting twist. But like, I don't think they were just limited to doing muscle mommy. I think they could have done a number of things, but you know, I've heard the excuse and the explanation given multiple times before that it was for gameplay.
But there was one character that barely changed at all from her original concept art, and that was Dina. Even in the early drawings, she already looked pretty close to the final version we got in the game.
Dude, and they used a like model scan. You can actually, I believe she streams on Twitch now, the model that they did the face scan from. And even this like concept art looks pretty similar to her, even in this early stage. Like they cast her pretty one-to-one with the concept art.
Even in the early drawings, she already looked pretty close to the final version we got in the game. Other characters that had interesting concept changes were the Seraphites. In the early designs, they wore these cool, creepy cloaks, which honestly made them look way more sinister. It would have been really interesting to see that in the final game. And now, there were a few characters that were completely cut from the game. One of them was Esther, Joel's girlfriend, that we already talked about earlier in the video. Another was Dina's sister, who Dina actually mentions to Ellie, but it's never really explain what happened to her. And
Ellie's girlfriend? They gave her the tattoo? Did I guess the next one?
Then there's Kat, Ellie's ex-girlfriend, who actually appeared.
I'm so good at this. Yeah, she actually gave her the tattoo. I believe there's still a few lines of dialogue in the game about it.
But only in the lost levels. We'll talk about those soon. And she also shows up in the season 2 of the show. But aside from that, there weren't any more really major characters cut from the game, at least not any that have been revealed so far. There were, however, some types of infected that got cut, some of them kinda weird. Maybe they wouldn't have made much sense within the game's more grounded and realistic world, but from a gameplay perspective, they could have been really interesting. Yes, there was a multiplayer plan for The Last of Us Part 2, but with such a heavy focus on the game's story and how important the single-player experience was, the multiplayer project was pushed aside and eventually evolved into what was supposed to become its own standalone game, The Last of Us Factions. The idea was to bring back all the core modes from the multiplayer in The Last of Us Remastered, and of course add some new ones too. We even got some leaks, a few images showing parts of the menu.
I still think this picture was fake as hell, dude. Look at that funky hand. I remember this. I think this thing was fake. Early, like, first gen AI generated images always had funky hands, and like the rooms don't make sense logically. So like this is like a windowsill, right? But it looks like it's angled back, right? Because of where this wall divider is. And so this looks like it's recessed, which is weird because like the angles don't look quite right. Like, I don't know, man. I still think this was fake. Maybe this was real. But I'd be surprised, man. It looks fake to me, but who knows?
The multiplayer project was pushed aside and eventually evolved into what was supposed to become its own standalone game, The Last of Us Faction.
This was early before it's my understanding of, like, from what I recall, when that image dropped, I went in and I think I had like an early membership to Midjourney, and I tried to make an image similar to it by giving them like prompts and stuff. And when I did that, sorry for the camera. When I did that, I got something that was fairly close. I don't remember if I did it on stream or not. Maybe you guys remember. I don't remember if that was on stream or not. But I remember trying to make something because I tried to generate just the basic room and the character, and then I was gonna go into Photoshop and add in like the UI on top of it to make the full faked version. But I don't know. Again, it could be real. It could be real. I'd be surprised. The fact that it's unfinished is not shocking. Like, yeah, I think it's weird that the main menu would have been sitting on a couch chilling in a post-apocalypse. Like, that seems odd to me, but whatever.
In the interface, but the most interesting part, the game was going to include a campaign. According to Neil Druckmann, it was a story that could only be told in this type of game.
Is that this game is big.
Okay.
It's as big as any of our single-player games that we've done, and in some ways bigger. It's got a story.
Bear in mind, they would cancel this and scrap all of it. And he's saying it's just as big as one of our single player games, if not bigger. And they scrapped all of it after like 4 or 5 years of development.
The way we're telling that story is very unique to this game. It's got a brand new cast of characters. It takes place at another place, another part of the United States.
It's like a city might be somewhat familiar, some people.
I'm sure our fans have already figured it out.
It would have been a co-op campaign, probably exploring the journey of some surviving Fireflies in their attempt to reach the WLF. It had the potential to be something really special, but even after all that investment, it ended up being cancelled.
Yeah. Do you think they yeah, I think they reuse assets for sure, but I think that more likely they repackage it into something. I don't know if it's like a free update for The Last of Us Part 2 or they do like probably not. But I don't think they just let all of that go to waste. I'd be very surprised if they did that, because they, again, the estimations were that they started work on it in like 2019 and they worked on it through 2023 or 2024. I forget when they officially canceled it, but I mean, they were working on that thing for like 5 years. What went wrong with it? I mean, it's still up for debate. What they said publicly was that they realized the work that was going to be required to keep it up and maintain it was going to be so intense that it would transition Naughty Dog from a studio that made single player games into basically just an online studio. And they didn't want to do that. So they were allowed to cancel it and go back to what they do best, which is single player games that, you know, get Game of the Year awards and stuff. I think right around the exact same time is when Jim Ryan was pushed out of PlayStation leadership. He's the one that forced all of these studios and companies to do live service crap, even when it didn't work with their talent set. He gets pushed out. They cancel this. They canceled like 5 other live service games. They shut down a bunch of other projects all around the same time. So I think it was basically that Jim got booted out. Hiroki Totoki and his team from Japan came in and were like, okay, he's an idiot. What do we need to do? And then they finally were listened to by the real head honcho, and they allowed them to pivot back. That's my personal guess. That's my personal guess, is that it was a lot of, C-suite shenanigans, but I guess we'll never know. We probably will eventually. We'll hear something. I don't know. Like, it's at this point, it's something we'll probably hear in a book in 5 years when somebody finally opens up. But right now, it's still pretty fresh.
There are some lines of dialogue that are honestly really interesting to hear that were cut, mostly between Joel and Ellie, of course. Here's one that was supposed to happen during that flashback with Ellie, Joel, and Tommy. A really sweet little conversation between Joel and Ellie.
So I noticed that her hologram map thing, it's a moth. Was that where your tattoo came from?
Maybe. Judgy.
I ain't judging, just curious.
Liar.
Well, like I said, I ain't judging. I think the moth is pretty.
Very cute indeed. And here's another one to warm your heart today, another Joel and Ellie moment. This one would have taken place during Ellie's birthday. Yep, the best chapter in the whole game.
Hello, sir. How may I help you?
Was that like your British accent? Not obvious, actually.
Just play along, Joel.
One ticket, please.
That'll be $1 million.
That's an expensive museum.
I will give it to her, Ashley Johnson. As a voice actress, I'm sure she's really good at British accents, but she has to play a teenager who's bad at British accents and present it that way. It's actually done quite well.
Here you go, $1 million.
Thank you. And here is your change. How much would a ticket actually cost?
Less than $1 million.
How much money did you have?
Way less than $1 million.
I miss these two together so much, but I've still got one more little treat for you. This one is between Dina and Ellie. I'm not sure exactly when this was supposed to happen, but judging by the tone and everything, probably sometime before Joel's death.
The day we met, you introduced yourself to me and Joel like you were the mayor or something, because I thought you were cute. Shut up.
I hate you.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
I love you.
I love you too.
I love these little lines so much. They're so personal, just a few seconds, but they stick with you for a long time. It's beautiful.
Lost Levels. Yeah, this was genuinely a really cool thing when they released these. If you don't know, they did a free update where they included a bunch of levels that were unfinished and cut from the game. And you can play through them with developer commentary, where you go to little positions within the level, click a button, and it plays like a voiceover of somebody explaining what was going to happen there. It's genuinely really, really cool.
I'll go through these a bit quicker because even though, yeah, they are cut content, they were later added into the game through the remastered version where we can actually play all 3 lost levels. One of them takes place in Jackson before the big dance party where Ellie and Dina dance. In it, we could play around with different minigames, mixing drinks, pretending to be a clicker to scare kids, and even having little interactions with some beloved characters. Another level is a sewer one, which would have taken place during Ellie's second day in Seattle. This one focused more on puzzles and very claustrophobic moments, and also on showing how truly traumatized Ellie was after Joel's death, including some scenes that reflected her PTSD.
What a time for it to go out.
The last level
I kind of wish that had stayed in, honestly.
happens after the entire Seattle journey. Already at the farm with Ellie and Dina, Ellie goes out to hunt a boar, and the idea here was to mirror what happened in the first game, that time skip where Joel was injured and then we cut very abruptly to Ellie hunting alone. Now it would be Ellie and Dina were both wounded and the time skip cuts to Ellie hunting again. And it's here we see once again how deeply traumatized Ellie still is, with heavy focus on her PTSD and how much Joel suffered and how much she's still suffering from all that happened. Very terrifying, to be honest. Out of all 3, I think this one might be the best, and honestly I wish they had kept it in the game. The Last of Us Part
Yeah, I really wish that had stayed in. There were some good ideas they scrapped for whatever reason.
2 was a game that tried to do more than it probably should have. With all the love people had, with all the love I still have for the first game, the story they wanted to tell in Part 2 was never going to work 100%. That's just my opinion, of course. If you disagree, that's totally fine.
No, I think you're totally right. It was, in many ways, it was a story designed to upset the fan base. And then they acted surprised when the fan base was upset and livid. You know, like it really was crafted to piss people off because they're like, yeah, well, once they're pissed off, then they'll feel like Ellie going after Abby. It's like, yeah, but towards you, dude, like towards the developers for doing this. People are smart enough to realize that this is a video game you made and that you were trying to manipulate them emotionally into that way. And people can see through it, and you shouldn't be surprised when they don't like it. You know, it's why I've said a bajillion times. I think The Last of Us as a story, as like a broad overarching arc, you know, I think that it could have worked with other characters, with a different setting. Like if they had done a sci-fi game and put these like different characters in, it could have worked. Flip the perspective and everything from a fresh cast of characters. I think it could have worked just fine. But because you used 2 characters that were deeply beloved by the entire gaming industry, people were pissed about it.
I get it, but one thing we all have to give this game is the praise it deserves for being technically almost flawless. It's one of the most beautiful games ever made, with top-tier gameplay, acting, facial expressions. Everything in this game is crafted down to the smallest detail, and for that, it truly deserves recognition. I love this franchise, but I only learned to love it because of these 2, Joel and Ellie, and how special they were to me. I honestly can't fully put into words, at least not right now, how deeply I feel about these characters, but I miss them very much. I don't like to hate, but sometimes this game really tries to make me do it. There's so much I love about Part 2 and a lot I just don't. But hey, that's just an opinion, right? Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you so much for watching.
A well done video. So stay until the end. Is there one more little snippet?
If somehow the Lord... I like that.
Damn it, dude, you got me. That's so good. It's so well done. SilverSentry. New up-and-coming YouTuber pumped out a very, very impressive video here. Lots of good research, even some stuff I hadn't seen before after covering this game a lot. So props to TheSilverSentry. Recommend you go over. Links, again, I'll put them in the stream chat once more so you can go sub and give them a like and stuff, and then it'll be in the description box and everything here. Always nice to see a creator come out with something that's just... to borrow a word from Neil, fresh. Fresh, like the buff muscle mommy Abby. So props TheSilverSentry, really well done. He took my thing.